Moses. The very mention of his name invokes images of God's deliverance and the establishment of Israel as the people of God. The historical evidence for the existence of the man Moses stands without any real criticism. But what about the Exodus itself? What evidence is there of this great historical and biblical event? Apart from the Bible, most of us are familiar with the image of Moses and the crossing of the Red Sea on the way to Mount Sinai, thanks to Cecil B. DeMille's monumental movie, The Ten Commandments. What most of us do not know is that there is a great deal of archaeological evidence that supports as historical fact what has been taken by faith. There are three basic views regarding the crossing of the Red Sea and the location of that crossing. Some have taught that Moses and the children of Israel did not cross the Red Sea at all, but instead crossed the Sea of Reeds, a marshy area in the Nile Delta region. However, this does not explain how Pharaoh and all his army could perish in so little amount of water, or how they could not overcome the fleeing Israelites and to bring them back into captivity. In response, liberal scholars have devised a hypothesis to explain the miracle of the parting waters. The view states that there was probably a volcanic explosion in the Greek islands. This caused a tidal wave that traveled over 500 miles to the upper Nile Delta region. As the wave approached, waters from the Sea of Reeds were sucked out just in time for Israel to pass. Then, as Pharaoh's army followed, the tidal wave hit, drowning the pursuing soldiers. One could argue that such a theory would certainly be a miracle of timing. Apart from small pieces of volcanic rock, there is no archaeological or historical evidence that such an event ever occurred. Instead, this is simply a theory attempting to explain away a miracle of God that ends up raising more questions than it answers. The most popular view, as presented in the majority of Bible maps, is that Moses led the nation of Israel from the land of Goshen to the Gulf of Suez in order to cross the Red Sea at its northern tip and into the Sinai Peninsula on their way to Mount Sinai at the southern tip of the peninsula. Here we find the traditional location for the mountain of God, Mount Sinai. However, there is no archaeological evidence for this position. The location of God's holy mountain in the southern realm of the Sinai Peninsula is based on the tradition that was established by Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, in the 4th century. Helena based her conclusion that this was the real Mount Sinai on a vision given to her from a psychic. Throughout the centuries that followed, this location has traditionally been thought of as the biblical Mount Sinai. However, some very important facts were missing and are needed in order to find the true route of the Exodus. First, the location of Mount Sinai is clearly laid out in Scripture. The Bible must be consulted in order to find the mountain of God and the location of the Red Sea crossing. Second, the crossing of the Red Sea must be in a location that geographically and topographically would be accessible once the children of Israel arrived at that point. Third and finally, there should be some physical evidence for the crossing and for the location of the biblical Mount Sinai. The Bible provides for us the clues as to where Mount Sinai is located, and thus points us to the location of the crossing of the Red Sea. According to Exodus 3:12, Moses was to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt and to bring them to the mountain of God. However, the Sinai Peninsula is located in Egypt. Therefore, according to Scripture, the biblical Mount Sinai cannot be in this location. Additionally, the Bible indicates that Mount Sinai was in the land of Midian. Moses was the son-in-law of Jethro, a priest of Midian. The land of Midian is not in the Sinai Peninsula, but is located east of the Gulf of Aqaba. Finally, the Bible plainly tells us that Mount Sinai is located in Arabia. Paul makes this clear in Galatians 4:25. The land of Midian was in Arabia, where Saudi Arabia is today. Therefore, the best route for the Exodus would take us across the middle of the Sinai Peninsula to the Red Sea's Gulf of Aqaba, and then into modern-day Saudi Arabia. But is this route obtainable? After all, the western coast of the Gulf of Aqaba is extremely mountainous, and for the most part is virtually impossible to approach. There is, however, a pass through the mountains at a place called Nuweiba in Egypt. This pass would provide a possible route for the Exodus. The pass opens to a large beach where the Israelites could camp, allowing God to block Pharaoh's approach as described in Exodus chapter 14. This brings us to a second problem. Once the waters are parted, it has to be in a location where the Red Sea is not so deep as to make it impossible for the children of Israel to descend into the seabed. Nuweiba is such a place. While most of the Gulf of Aqaba is several hundred meters deep, making it impractical to cross once the waters were removed, the depth of the waters at Nuweiba is not nearly as deep, making it very possible to cross once the waters were parted. In fact, there is a gradual slope at this location that would allow carts, wagons, and chariots to descend into the dried seabed, cross the Red Sea, and up into Saudi Arabia. Thus, a natural underwater land bridge exists at this location. Marine archaeologists have recently explored this site and have made some amazing discoveries. While excavating the underwater land bridge, they discovered horse bones. The bone on the left is a modern horse bone. The one on the right was discovered at the bottom of the Red Sea at Nuweiba. They also discovered the remains of human bones. Some, such as this rib cage, was embedded in the rocks. Others, such as this pelvic bone, were removed and examined. These bones date to about 1450 BC, or the time of the Exodus. They also found something else. Chariot wheels. Lots of chariot wheels. Most of the wheels, such as this one with its spokes and axles preserved in the Red Sea, were covered with barnacles. These wheels have been identified as uniquely Egyptian. According to Dr. Nassaf Mohammed Hassin, Director of Antiquities in Cairo, the chariot wheels discovered at the bottom of the Red Sea date to the 18th dynasty, or to the time of the Exodus, around 1450 BC. And at least 2 wheels had little or no barnacles on them because they were made of gold, making them difficult for the barnacles to attach themselves to those wheels. Only the pharaohs had golden chariots. This location not only provides the geographical and topographical elements necessary for the crossing of the Red Sea and the Exodus, it also provides archaeological evidence that is extremely convincing. But what about the other side, once we enter into Saudi Arabia? The Bible tells us in Exodus 15:22 through 23, that after the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea, they went 3 days into the wilderness without water, until they came to a place where the waters were bitter. About 30 to 40 miles east of the crossing site, which would be about a 3 days' journey on foot by such a large company of people, a water hole was discovered where the waters were bitter and could not be drunk. Could this be the waters of Marah? The Bible tells us that as they continued, they came to an oasis with 70 palm trees and 12 springs of fresh water. Modern archaeologists have discovered an oasis with numerous palm trees east of the bitter waters. They also found at this location 12 springs of fresh water still used by the people of Saudi Arabia to this very day. This brings us to a place called Jebel el-Lars, which is Arabic for the Mountain of Laws. However, the local Bedouins call this place Jebel el-Musa, the Mountain of Moses. The dark region on the top of this mountain is not caused by shadow, nor is it volcanic rock. Instead, the top of this mountain is burnt. Archaeologists have determined that the top of Jebel el-Lars is granite that has been exposed to intense fire, causing the surface of the granite to be burnt. According to Exodus 19:18, the Lord descended on Mount Sinai, causing the mountain to burn with fire.
And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. Exodus 19:18.
While looking down from Jabal el-Lars, one can see the remains of an ancient altar. This altar has no markings and would certainly match what is stated in Exodus 24:4, that Moses built an altar at the base of Mount Sinai. We are also told that he set up 12 pillars to honor the 12 tribes of Israel. At the Jabal el-Lars altar, there are the remains of pillars that could be the 12 pillars of Moses. In Exodus 32:5, we are told of a second altar, one built by Aaron, where the golden calf was made and worshipped. At Jabal el-Lars, there is a second altar, one that has the marking of Egyptian cattle. Additionally, there is a very unusual rock at Jabal el-Lars. It stands on the western side of the mountain and is about 5 stories high, resting on a hill that is about 200 feet high. In addition to the unique split down the middle of this rock, there is also evidence of massive water erosion that could only be caused by massive amounts of water pouring through this crack. However, this is a region of the world that receives less than an inch of rain a year. In Exodus 17:6, we are told that God instructed Moses to strike the rock, and water would spring from it.
Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Exodus 17:6.
All of this adds up and supplies substantial evidence that supports what we have taken by faith regarding the Exodus. While more studies need to be done in this region and of the evidence discovered thus far, we can note the following. There is a location at the Red Sea that would allow geographically and topographically for the Israelites to pass once the waters were removed. At this location, on an underwater land bridge, were found the remains of human and horse bones, along with numerous chariot wheels that date to the time of the Exodus. In Saudi Arabia, about 30 miles from this crossing, there is a pool of bitter water, followed by an oasis with 12 springs of fresh water. This leads us to Jabal el-Lars, a mountain where the granite is burnt on top. At this mountain, there are 2 altars, one with no markings and 12 pillars, and the other with Egyptian cattle markings. And there is a massive split rock with signs of water erosion at its base. Miracles cannot be proven with scientific evidence alone. They have to be believed, taken by faith. The Exodus and the miracles that occurred with it must likewise be taken by faith. But in this case, faith is not blind. The God of the Bible has provided physical evidence that what he said happened truly did occur.